Okay, so today we're going to dive into some really interesting stuff about U.S. troops in Europe.
Sounds good.
Yeah, we've got a lot to unpack. We've got this interview with Admiral Dragon from NATO. He's the head of the military committee,
Yeah.
you know,
Right.
and it's from RBC Ukraine, so it's a pretty recent interview. And then we've got some reports from the Telegraph and the Washington Post.
Okay. Interesting.
And they're all kind of talking about, are U.S. troops going to stay in Europe? Are they going to leave? Are they going to, shift around? And what does that all mean? Like, what's the reality of the situation?
Right. Because I feel like we see those headlines all the time, troops in, troops out, troops moving. It's hard to get a clear picture.
Exactly. And that's what we're going to try to do today. Like, what's the real deal here?
Okay.
So, right off the bat, you see this like big difference between what Admiral Dragon's saying officially from NATO and like what you see in some of these news reports. So like Dragon's saying straight up, NATO hasn't seen any U.S. plans to change, where their troops are in Europe. And he like keeps saying over and over that the U.S. is like totally committed to NATO. And the whole transatlantic partnership and their European allies, like it's the main point he's making.
Yeah, that they're there to stay, basically.
He's like, this is rock solid.
Interesting.
Yeah, and then he talks about how NATO's defense plans are like super strong, and they're always updating them, to make sure they can handle anything, like if they need to defend or just deter someone from doing something stupid.
Yeah, keep everyone safe.
Exactly. And then he says something that I thought was really important.
What's that?
He says that any moves of U.S. troops in the future, whether they're coming into Europe or leaving Europe, it's all going to be done, coordinating with all 32 NATO allies.
Oh, wow. So it's not just like the U.S. is going to do whatever they want.
No, it's like a big group decision.
Okay. So very much a team effort.
Exactly. And then he like really emphasizes that they want to keep the same level of security and defense and deterrence that they've had for the last 75 years.
Yeah.
Like that's the goal.
Right. Consistency.
Yeah, basically.
So it sounds like from NATO's perspective, things are pretty stable.
Yeah, that's definitely the vibe they're giving off.
Okay. But then we have these news reports that are painting kind of a different picture.
Totally. And this is where it gets juicy.
Okay, let's hear it.
So we've got reports about potential plans from the Trump administration.
Right.
And just to be clear, we're just reporting what's in these articles.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we're not taking sides or anything.
Got it.
So the Telegraph is saying that they might pull out like 35,000 troops from Germany.
Wow.
Yeah, and maybe send some of them over to Eastern Europe, like Hungary specifically.
It's a big shift.
Yeah, and then the Washington Post is reporting on plans to take out something like 20,000 troops from Europe in general.
So that's a lot of troops potentially leaving.
Right, and that's why it's so confusing.
Yeah.
You've got this NATO guy saying everything's fine, we're all good, and then you've got these news outlets saying there might be these huge changes.
Right, it's like two totally different stories.
Exactly. It's like, are they reading from the same script or what?
Right.
So how do we make sense of this? Like, how do we explain this to people?
Well, I think one thing to remember is that Admiral Dragon, he's talking about like the official policy right now and what he's been told by the U.S.
Okay.
But these news reports, they might be picking up on stuff that's happening behind the scenes, like internal discussions that haven't become official NATO policy yet.
So like maybe the U.S. is thinking about making changes, but they haven't told NATO for sure yet?
Yeah, maybe. Or it could be like leaks,
Right. Someone trying to stir the pot.
Yeah, exactly. So it's possible that these reports are about things that might happen in the future, not necessarily what's happening right this second.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah. And it also shows how complicated this whole thing is. There's the official story, and then there's all this stuff going on behind the scenes.
Totally. So like, what's the main takeaway here for our listeners? Like, what should they be thinking about?
I think the main thing is that even though there are these reports about possible changes, with U.S. troops in Europe, the official word from NATO is that everything is stable.
Right.
The U.S. is still committed, and they're going to make any decisions together with all the other NATO allies.
Okay, so basically don't freak out just yet.
Exactly. Wait and see what happens.
Right.
But it's definitely something to keep an eye on.
Totally.
Because there's clearly a difference between what NATO is saying publicly and what some of these reports are suggesting.
Okay, so just to recap real quick, we've got Admiral Dragon saying that NATO is strong and the U.S. is committed. And then we've got these reports from the Telegraph and the Washington Post that are talking about possible U.S. troop withdrawals and like moving troops around in Europe.
Right. And the big question is like, what's really going on?
Yeah. Are these reports accurate or is NATO trying to downplay things?
Right. And what's going to happen in the future?
Exactly. So
Yeah.
this is where we want to get you thinking, you know?
Yeah. What do you think?
What do you think is going to happen with U.S. troops in Europe?
Given all this information, the official statements and the media reports,
Right. Like, what factors are going to be the most important in deciding what happens?
and how is this all going to affect Europe's security, in the long run?
That's the big question.
It's something to really think about because there are no easy answers right now.
Yeah, it's a complex situation for sure.
Definitely.
Well, this has been a really interesting dive.
Yeah, it has.
We've covered a lot of ground today,
We have.
and we've given you a lot to think about.
Hopefully.
So thanks for joining us,
Yeah, thanks for having me.
and we'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.
See you later.